They thought walking away would break you. They thought the silence they left behind would become your prison. They thought you'd unravel, chasing, begging, falling apart. But something unexpected happened instead. You didn't collapse. You evolved. You didn't lose your worth. You found it, beneath the rubble of their absence, in the stillness of the pain, in the echo of every unanswered question. Because betrayal, while brutal, didn't destroy you. It ignited you. It became the spark, the crack in the surface. The unexpected invitation to transform not out of revenge, but out of reclamation. This is not a story about heartbreak. It's a story about rebirth. A story about how sometimes the moment someone thinks they're leaving you shattered is the exact moment you begin to rebuild. Not louder, not with noise or chaos, but quietly, with grace, with discipline, with the kind of clarity that no longer needs to shout to be heard. That's what makes this transformation so powerful. It's not performative. It's not shared in long speeches or angry text messages or dramatic exits. It's silent, but it's seismic. You change behind closed doors. You rise when no one is watching. You become untouchable, not because you seek revenge, but because you outgrow the need for it. That's the Stoic way. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who wronged you." Let that sink in. You don't get even. You get clear. You don't argue. You become undeniable. You stop needing their apology. You stop needing their approval. You stop hoping they'll finally understand the pain they caused. Because suddenly it no longer matters. They were the chapter. You are the author. And now, this moment, this is where your transformation begins. When you shift from pain to purpose, from chaos to composure, from emotional reaction to internal revolution. Have you ever noticed how people panic when you stop reacting? When you stop pleading, when you stop explaining yourself, when you go quiet, but not defeated, quiet with a sense of unshakable calm. That's because silence disrupts the patterns they once used to control you. They expected tears. They expected arguments. They expected you to lose your footing. But what they didn't expect was your stillness, your ability to walk away, not bitter, but better. To let go, not out of weakness, but wisdom. To rebuild, not for them to see, but for you to live. Because here's the truth. This is not about getting over them. It's about getting back to you. The version of you that no longer needs to perform emotional labor for people unwilling to carry their own weight. The version of you that doesn't chase closure, but chooses clarity. The version of you that now knows your peace isn't up for negotiation. And it all starts right here. Right in the moment when you finally decide you're no longer explaining. You're no longer justifying. You're no longer available for anything that costs you your dignity. You've outgrown that. Now you rise differently, with quiet fire, with calm discipline. With eyes forward and your past behind you, not erased, but understood. This is not about pain anymore. This is about power. The kind of power that comes from letting go and leveling up. The kind that doesn't scream for attention. It simply is. And people feel it, even if they can't explain it. So, if you're here, watching this, wondering how to begin again after the storm, start with your silence. Let it become your sanctuary. Let it become your strategy. Let it become your strength. Because this is your moment now. Not to get even, not to be seen, but to become untouchable. Not out of ego, but out of evolution. This is the power of quiet transformation. Part 1. The real cost of betrayal. Betrayal doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it comes in silence, in the sudden distance from someone you trusted, in the cold shift of tone, in the quiet realization they were never who you thought they were. And yet, you didn't scream, you didn't lash out. You didn't try to burn it all down just to be heard. You took the harder path. You chose silence, not because you were weak, but because you were becoming stronger. While they expected chaos, you began your reconstruction. Not out loud, not for applause, but quietly, inwardly, relentlessly. That's the power most people don't see, the power of the person who doesn't react with fire but refuses to be consumed by it. You see, betrayal comes at a high cost. Not just the pain of losing someone you trusted, but the deep inner questioning that follows. You start asking yourself, was I too naive? Was I not enough? Why didn't I see it sooner? It forces you into self-reflection about love, loyalty, self-worth, and judgment. And that's what makes betrayal so personal. Because it's not just the lie that hurts. It's the fact that you believed in something that turned out not to be real. But here's where Stoic philosophy offers us a lifeline. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." What does that mean? It means betrayal only destroys us when we let it define us. When we allow it to shrink our worldview, to poison our future, to shape our identity. But you don't have to carry betrayal like a scarlet letter. You can carry it like a torch. Because in Stoicism, pain isn't punishment. It's a pathway, a call to evolve, a nudge to detach from illusion and come home to truth. And sometimes, that truth begins with silence. You didn't need to post about it. You didn't need to tell the world your side of the story. You didn't need to expose them, shame them, or seek revenge. Why? Because you were busy doing something far more radical. You were rebuilding. Betrayal may have cracked your heart open, but through that crack, the light got in. A new perspective. A deeper strength. A calm awareness that the only thing truly under your control is your response. You stopped looking for closure in conversations with people who were never honest to begin with. You stopped trying to explain your worth to someone who couldn't even recognize it. You stopped investing in people who treated your loyalty like a convenience. And slowly, something shifted. You stopped asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and started asking, "What is this teaching me?" That's when you took your power back. Not in revenge, not in a dramatic exit, but in subtle rewiring deep within. You learned how to love without losing yourself, how to see red flags without painting them white, how to honor your own energy the way you once honored everyone else's. And that kind of transformation, it can't be faked. It can't be rushed. It can't be handed to you by anyone else. It's earned in silence, in reflection. In every lonely, powerful moment, you chose growth over reaction. This is what the Stoics knew all along. That we don't get stronger by avoiding pain. We get stronger by walking through it, intentionally, courageously, without allowing it to harden us. You're not here to become bitter. You're here to become bulletproof, to feel everything, and still choose wisdom, to be disappointed, and still choose dignity, to be betrayed, and still choose you. Because now you know, you can be calm and powerful, you can be silent and strong. You can lose people, and still never lose yourself. So let them think they broke you. They didn't. They woke you, and now you're becoming someone they never saw coming. Not louder, not angrier, but clearer, calmer, untouchable. Betrayal didn't end you. It introduced you to a version of yourself that you might have never met without it. And that is the beginning of quiet power. Part 2. The unexpected rise. They thought you'd chase them. They thought you'd beg for clarity, plead for closure, or spiral without their validation. They expected the version of you they once controlled, the version who doubted your worth, who over-explained, who tried to prove your love to someone who never had the capacity to hold it. But you didn't collapse. You detached, and that was your unexpected rise. Not loud, not theatrical, just clean, calm. Complete, because nothing confuses someone who thought they had power over you more than your silence. Your absence became the loudest boundary you ever set. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. You didn't need to burn bridges. You simply stopped crossing them. You didn't make an announcement. You just stopped showing up where your spirit was being quietly disrespected. That's the kind of strength most people don't understand. The strength of restraint. Because in a world where people respond to betrayal with rage, revenge, or public exposure, you chose the harder path. Self-mastery. You didn't respond to disrespect by lowering yourself. You rose by remembering who you are. And yes, it hurt. Don't let anyone tell you healing is graceful. It was raw. It was lonely. It was one of the hardest things you've ever done. But you did it anyway. And here's the truth most people miss. Sometimes, pain is the greatest wake-up call you'll ever receive. Because let's be honest, if they hadn't betrayed you, you might have kept giving, kept hoping, kept self-abandoning just to keep them comfortable. But their betrayal, it was the break that set you free. It cut the cord you didn't have the strength to sever yourself. And in doing so, it gave you the space to finally look at yourself and ask, why was I holding on so tightly to someone who held me so loosely? That's when everything began to shift. You realized you weren't devastated because of what they did. You were devastated because of what you tolerated. You had been shrinking yourself, walking on emotional eggshells, accepting crumbs and calling it a feast. And it took the sting of their silence, the sharpness of their betrayal, to finally remind you, you were never meant to live small. You were never meant to water yourself down to be digestible to someone who had no appetite for your depth. This wasn't just heartbreak. It was an awakening. And that's what makes this rise so unexpected. Because they thought they broke you, but what they really did was awaken a version of you that no longer seeks healing in the hands that caused the wound. A version of you that understands. Detachment is not cruelty. It's clarity. Distance is not punishment. It's protection. And restraint? Restraint is not weakness. It's the highest form of strength. Because anyone can explode, anyone can react, but to pause, to breathe, to quietly walk away and rebuild without needing to be seen. That's true power. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. And that's exactly what you did. You stopped trying to control how they saw you. You stopped trying to fix what was never yours to fix. You stopped giving energy to people who only ever returned confusion. Instead, you poured that energy inward. You started rebuilding, not to impress, not to prove anything, but because you finally remembered what you're worthy of. Now look at you. You're not chasing, you're not explaining, you're not asking them to come back. You're just becoming steadier, clearer, calmer. And that calm, it's not emptiness. It's presence, it's peace, it's the result of finally choosing you. So, if you're still hurting right now, if you're still in the middle of the silence, the sting, the confusion, just know this. You are not breaking. You are becoming. Becoming someone who no longer betrays themselves for the illusion of love. Becoming someone who can hold their own emotional weight. Becoming someone who rises, not through noise, but through clarity. And they didn't see it coming. But you did, because this is the version of you that was waiting all along. And now, you don't need closure. You are the closure. You don't need to be understood. You've outgrown the need for approval. You don't need to explain your absence. Your peace speaks for itself. They thought losing them would destroy you, but it's what finally gave you back to yourself. That's not revenge. That's evolution. That's the unexpected rise. Part 3. The psychology of why they betrayed you. Let's ask the question that keeps most people up at night. Why did they betray me? You trusted them. You stood by them. You gave them access to your heart, your loyalty, your truth. And still, they chose to lie, to cheat, to disappear, to hurt. It's easy to assume the worst. Maybe they hated you. Maybe you weren't enough. Maybe you did something wrong. But what if the answer isn't about you at all? What if their betrayal was never rooted in hate, but in fear? Fear of your clarity, fear of your strength, fear of your ability to stand tall without them. You see, when you start owning your voice, setting boundaries, living with integrity, you expose people who were surviving off control. And that exposure makes them uncomfortable. Not because you were cruel, but because you reflected back to them the parts of themselves they were trying to avoid. Your standards revealed their inconsistency. Your calm revealed their chaos. Your self-respect challenged the version of themselves they were clinging to. So instead of rising with you, they ran. They didn't betray you because you lacked something. They betrayed you because your presence triggered what they lacked. And in that moment, they had a choice: to evolve or to escape. And like many people who live in emotional survival mode, they chose the latter. Because it's easier to sabotage a relationship than to do the inner work it demands. It's easier to ghost than to confront. It's easier to blame you than to face themselves. And here's what the Stoics teach us. When someone acts badly, it's because they've judged it to be right. Epictetus. They didn't betray you thinking, "This is cruel." In their mind, it was justified. They told themselves stories like, "I had no choice. They were too good for me. They made me feel small. I need to protect myself." But let's be clear, that wasn't protection. That was projection. They weren't protecting themselves from you. They were protecting themselves from the discomfort of not being in control. Because here's a psychological truth. People often betray you the moment they realize they can't control you anymore, when they can no longer manipulate your emotions, when they can't guilt you into silence, when they sense your independence is real and growing. That's when they panic. And instead of being honest about their fear, they sabotage what they don't know how to nourish. And yes, it hurts. Deeply. But if you're not careful, you'll internalize their fear as your failure. You'll start believing the lie that says, "If I had just been more forgiving, more patient, more accommodating." But let's flip the narrative. What if their betrayal wasn't a reflection of your inadequacy, but of your evolution? What if it wasn't about you being too much, but them being too afraid? Afraid of not measuring up, afraid of being seen, afraid of someone who doesn't need their approval to feel whole. And that kind of person, you, is threatening to someone who only knows how to connect through control. So what do? They run, they project, they rewrite the story so they don't have to face the mirror you held up to them. They betray, not because they hate you, but because they fear what your presence demands from them. Growth, honesty, accountability, and some people aren't ready for that. Some people prefer shallow connection over deep self-awareness. Some people would rather burn the bridge than walk across it hand in hand with someone who challenges them to rise. So here's what you must remember. Their betrayal wasn't proof that you were too much. It was proof that they weren't enough for the version of you that was emerging. And that's not arrogance, that's clarity. The moment someone chooses to walk away from your honesty, your strength, your loyalty, let them. Because they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting the work it would take to meet you where you stand. And while that might sting now, in time, it becomes your freedom. Because the truth is, you didn't lose someone who valued you. You lost someone who feared what you made them confront. And that's not your fault. That's their journey. Your journey is to keep becoming. To stay clear, to stay calm, to stay rooted in who you are, even when others run from it. Because in the end, their betrayal wasn't about you. It was about their fear of what it would take to love you right. They didn't betray you out of hate. They betrayed you because your growth left no more room for their games. And one day, they'll remember the one person who didn't need to be chased, fixed, or controlled, only respected. And by then, you'll be long gone, not bitter, just better. Part 4. The power of silence. Let's talk about one of the most underestimated tools you'll ever have in your emotional arsenal. Silence. Not the kind of silence rooted in fear. Not the kind that avoids conflict or buries pain. But the kind of silence that speaks louder than any argument ever could. You see, when someone disrespects you, when they lie, manipulate, project, or push your boundaries, your first instinct might be to respond, to defend yourself, to set the record straight, to prove your side of the story. That's human. That's emotional reflex. But what if the most powerful move was no move at all? What if silence, strategic, calm, dignified silence, was the ultimate act of self-control? Because here's the truth. Narcissists fear silence. They fear it more than confrontation, more than anger, more than anything you could ever say. Why? Because silence removes their supply. No reaction, no drama, no fuel. Suddenly, they're left alone, facing the mirror they've spent years avoiding. When you stop reacting, they lose control of the narrative. When you stop explaining, they lose their ability to twist your words. When you stop participating, they're forced to sit with the one person they've spent their whole life running from, themselves. That is terrifying for them, but it's freedom for you. And this isn't about punishment. It's about protection. Your silence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally learn to care about yourself more than their chaos. Let me give you a real-world example. You receive a long, manipulative message, the kind designed to bait you, guilt you, pull you back into the emotional loop you just escaped. Old, you might have typed out a 5-paragraph response, explaining, defending, trying to make them see what they did wrong. But evolved, you read it, you breathe, and you say nothing. That's not avoidance. That's mastery. Because silence is not the absence of thought. It's the presence of wisdom. It's you choosing to conserve your energy rather than invest in a conversation that was never designed to reach understanding. As Epictetus once said, it is not things that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. The message isn't the problem. Their words aren't the problem. It's what we do with them. When you interpret every attack as a command to respond, you stay stuck. But when you shift your mindset, when you recognize that not everything requires your energy, you step into true emotional power. And silence? That's not passive. That's intentional detachment. It's your way of saying, I no longer need to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding me. I refuse to hand over my peace in exchange for temporary vindication. You don't get access to the version of me that fights to prove a point. That version is gone. This is the turning point, because narcissists and emotionally toxic people feed off your reactions. They want you to rage. They want you to explain. They want you to step back into the ring and play the role they've written for you. But when you don't, when you remain still, when you let their message hang unanswered, that's when the power dynamic flips. You are no longer dancing for their attention. You are no longer trying to rescue the relationship. You are no longer emotionally accessible to someone who's weaponized your vulnerability. And that silence, it becomes your boundary. Your armor, your freedom. Let them be confused. Let them assume you're cold, distant, unbothered. Let them feel the silence they created when they chose manipulation over honesty. Because silence is not the absence of love. It's the presence of self-respect. It says, I could respond, but I don't owe you that access anymore. It says, I could correct you, but I've outgrown that need. It says, this conversation, this game, is no longer worth the weight of my words. You've graduated. You've stopped chasing closure in conversations that were never meant to bring healing. You've stopped trying to be the bigger person in battles you never signed up for. You've stopped giving voice to wounds that now deserve only one thing: space. So the next time someone tries to bait you with a text, a comment, a post, a jab, ask yourself, what would my silence say in this moment? Because sometimes silence says, I see you. I just choose not to join you. When you go silent, not out of fear but out of wisdom, you shift the power, you stop explaining, you start evolving. And in doing so, you become someone they can no longer read, someone they can no longer reach, someone they can no longer rattle. That's not revenge. That's clarity. That's stoic. That's you, rising. Part 5. Natural consequences. Karma without revenge. Let's be honest. When someone hurts you, part of you wants justice. You imagine them waking up one day, feeling everything they made you feel. You wonder if karma will catch up to them, if they'll ever regret what they did, if they'll ever face the same pain they caused so carelessly. But here's the Stoic truth. Karma isn't magic. It's cause and effect. It's not about the universe plotting revenge on your behalf. It's about reality doing what it always does, reflecting back the weight of people's choices. Seneca, one of the great Stoic minds, put it plainly. Every guilty person is his own hangman. In other words, those who harm others, knowingly, repeatedly, without remorse, don't need to be punished by you. They're already punished by themselves, and maybe not right away. Maybe they look like they're thriving. Posting pictures, starting something new, pretending like nothing ever happened. But what you don't see is what they carry in silence. Because here's the thing about betrayal, lies, manipulation. It always comes with a cost, and that cost is often hidden, not in public failure, but in private unrest. Let's break it down. When someone lies, cheats, or deceives, they may gain temporary control. They may even feel powerful in the moment. But what they lose over time is something far greater. They lose trust. They lose connection. They lose their own sense of peace. Because the longer you run from truth, the heavier your own lies become. Eventually, relationships around them start to fracture. People stop believing them. They get caught in contradiction after contradiction. They become emotionally unstable, not because someone cursed them, but because they've built their life on a foundation that's crumbling beneath them. That's not your doing. That's not revenge. That's the natural consequence of how they chose to live. And the Stoics would ask you, is that not enough? Does the person who hurt you need to be exposed publicly? Or have they already created their own prison? The truth is, those who betray others live in constant anxiety, looking over their shoulder, wondering when the next lie will catch up, when the truth will surface, when the pattern they created will finally unravel. That's not peace. That's survival mode. And you've moved on. Not because they deserved forgiveness, but because you deserved freedom. You stopped watching their life. You stopped checking for karma. You stopped hoping they'd finally get it, because you understood something deeper. Justice isn't your job. Peace is. And peace comes when you no longer feel the need to track someone else's downfall. When you realize the person who betrayed you has already paid a price. A life that lacks integrity. A heart that lacks stillness. A legacy built on broken trust. Eventually they lose what truly matters, the ability to love with depth, to be trusted, to feel safe in their own conscience. And no amount of applause or attention can replace that. So if you've ever found yourself asking, why haven't they suffered for what they did? Maybe the better question is, what kind of life are they living? If lies are the only language they know, that is karma. That is consequence. That is the weight of avoiding truth for so long. You forget what truth even feels like. And if you've done the work, if you've healed, grown, detached, evolved, you'll realize you don't even need to see their fall, because your rise is enough. You don't need to watch their world crumble. You've already built a new one without them in it. You don't need to expose them. You've already revealed you stronger, wiser, untouchable, so let go of the need for revenge. Let go of hoping they suffer. Let go of the energy that ties you to their choices, because in the end, they are their own karma. Their consequence isn't coming. It's already here. It lives in every fractured bond, every restless night, every shallow connection they try to fill the void with. And you've walked away with dignity intact. That's not weakness. That's mastery. That's what the Stoics meant when they said the best revenge is no revenge at all, just becoming the person they never had the strength to be. Let them carry their consequences. You carry your clarity, and every time you feel the urge to look back, remind yourself, peace isn't watching them fall. It's knowing you no longer have to. That's not karma. That's closure. Part 6. Indifference over revenge. Sometimes the strongest thing you'll ever do is nothing at all. No outburst. No angry texts, no dramatic exits. Just a silent, calculated decision. I'm done. Let's talk about the seductive illusion of revenge. When someone betrays you, cheats, lies, disrespects, you feel a fire inside. Your mind races. They need to feel what I felt. They should pay. I won't let them walk away clean. And for a moment you imagine the satisfaction, saying the perfect words, exposing their lies, making them beg, cry, crawl. But here's the brutal truth. Revenge costs peace. It feels like power in the short term, but it becomes poison in the long run. Because every moment you spend trying to get even is a moment you stay chained to the very person who hurt you. You're not healing. You're reliving. You're not moving on. You're looping back. That one jab at them, that snarky comment, that petty revenge move. It might boost your ego for an hour, but then what? You're still holding the rope, still watching their life. still letting them live rent-free in your mind. And Stoicism teaches us something better. It teaches us that true power is in not needing validation, not chasing closure, not reacting, because the moment you stop needing to win the emotional war, you've already won. Let me share a story with you. A woman I once coached had been in a long-term relationship. She gave everything: time, energy, loyalty. One day she discovered her partner had been cheating, not once, repeatedly. He expected a meltdown, he expected drama, he expected her to beg or fight or plead. But she did something far more powerful. She packed her things and left in silence. No explanation, no screaming match. No post on social media, just a calm exit and an unwavering commitment to never look back. 6 months later, she was thriving. New job, new friends. Healthier boundaries, clearer mind, brighter energy. And him, still spiraling, still making excuses. Still chasing ghosts of control he could no longer hold. You see, she didn't win by attacking. She won by evolving. She chose indifference over revenge. And that, my friends, is what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who wronged you." Not to sink to their level, not to play their game, but to walk so far past their chaos, they can't even reach you anymore. Indifference doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared deeply and decided you'd rather heal than haunt. It means you value your inner peace more than outside drama. Because here's the truth, they wanted a reaction, but you gave them a lesson. They expected noise. You gave them silence. They thought you'd fall apart. You built something better. Without them, that's not weakness, that's wisdom. And let's be honest, revenge might feel satisfying for a second, but it makes you a character in their story, indifference. It makes you the author of your own. So if you're sitting with the temptation to get even, ask yourself, do I want their attention or do I want freedom? Because those two things are rarely found in the same place. You don't need to block them out of spite. You don't need to post your glow up to prove a point. You don't need to make them feel small. Your absence is loud enough. Your peace is proof enough. Your evolution is more than enough. And over time, they'll notice. Not because you said something, but because your life, without them, speaks louder than words. Revenge keeps you in their storm. Indifference lets you walk into your own sunshine. So remember, you don't owe them rage. You don't owe them retaliation. You owe yourself peace. And that, more than anything else, is the final word. You didn't lose when they betrayed you. You would have lost if you let them drag you into their chaos. Instead, you rose in silence. You let their actions define them, not you. And now, you're free. That is indifference. That is power. That is your peace. Part 7. The Narcissists return and why it fails. They always come back. Not because they love you. Not because they suddenly grew a conscience. But because they realize you're no longer accessible. And for someone who thrives on control, that's unbearable. You see, narcissists don't return because of regret. They return because of lack. Lack of supply. Lack of attention. Lack of someone else to fill the role you used to carry. The mirror, the fixer, the emotional safety net. They remember the version of you who tolerated their chaos, who explained every feeling, who tried to prove your worth even when they gave you scraps. But what they don't realize is that version of you no longer exists. That version evolved quietly, powerfully, without needing applause or their validation. Let's unpack this. When someone toxic reappears in your life, after ghosting, lying, cheating, manipulating, it's tempting to think, maybe they've changed. Maybe they finally understand. But pause for a second and ask yourself, why are they back now? It's rarely timing, it's rarely fate, it's almost always convenience. They circle back, not because they see your value, but because they've lost access to it. That's not love, that's need. And need, when it comes from a place of control, not connection, is dangerous. In Stoicism, we're taught not to be fooled by appearances, but to observe motives, to seek the root beneath the surface. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed." Let's break that down in this context. You're not harmed by their message, their return, or their sudden flurry of compliments. You're only harmed if you choose to re-engage with the illusion that they've changed, when their pattern has proven otherwise. Because what they really miss is not you, but their access to you. The control, the predictability, the emotional labor you once gave so freely. But here's the twist. You've evolved. You no longer react the same way. You no longer try to decode mixed signals. You no longer water dead plants hoping they'll bloom. You've learned that not every message deserves a reply. Not every apology deserves re-entry. Not every return deserves a welcome. And that silence? That is not coldness. It is clarity. Your silence becomes a full sentence. It speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. It says, "I see who you are now. I see who I am now. And I choose peace over patterns." You are no longer the version of yourself who needed closure from someone who thrives on keeping the door half open. You are the closure. Your growth, your boundaries, your new life. That is the closure. And let's be honest, if someone really loved you, they wouldn't have forced you to heal from the way they treated you in the first place. They wouldn't return when it's convenient. They would have shown up when it mattered. But narcissists don't return to make things right. They return to regain control of the story, to rewrite the narrative, to test if the door is still unlocked. So lock it with grace, not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with indifference, because indifference is a language manipulators can't understand. It removes the drama they feed on. It denies them the reaction they seek. And when you stop explaining, when you stop hoping, when you stop entertaining the past, you reclaim your energy, your peace, your power. One of the most stoic things you'll ever do is to walk away without needing them to understand why. Because you've already understood enough. You've seen the cycle. You've learned the lesson. And now, you're done spinning. So when they come back, and they will, remember this. You don't owe anyone a second chance to wound you the same way twice. Your silence is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's healing. It's sovereignty. You are no longer reacting. You are no longer explaining. You are no longer shrinking to fit a space you've outgrown. Let them knock on the door that no longer opens. Let them feel the weight of your absence. Because the real flex isn't showing them what they missed. It's living so well that they never get a second chance to dim your light again. That is the ultimate power. That is the Stoic path. You don't need to slam the door. You don't need to make a speech. You simply don't answer. And that says everything. Part 8. Emotional intelligence and dignity. Sometimes justice doesn't look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like quiet evolution. You didn't burn bridges. You didn't explode, lash out, or create a scene. You simply stopped giving them access. And that, my friend, is what true emotional intelligence looks like. It's not about reacting louder. It's about responding smarter, or not responding at all. Because healing isn't always visible. It often happens in silence. In the subtle power of detachment. In the dignity of choosing yourself without needing to announce it. We live in a culture that glorifies the dramatic exit. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to walk away without a single word. Not because you're weak, but because you've grown. And growth doesn't always need an audience. Let me share a story with you. There was a man named Elijah, hardworking, consistent, loyal. He worked in a company where the environment was slowly corroding his peace. Backhanded comments, subtle sabotage, toxic leadership. Every day became a quiet battle. But Elijah didn't retaliate. He didn't gossip. He didn't plot revenge. He simply made a plan, stayed focused on his craft, and when the time was right, he left. No long email, no exit speech. Just a quiet resignation and a decision to protect his peace. 6 months later, Elijah had started his own consulting business. He was thriving, mentally, emotionally, and financially. Meanwhile, the very department that once mocked and underestimated him began to unravel. You see, growth is the justice. Not revenge, not chaos, but becoming so healed, so focused, so elevated, that they no longer even recognize the version of you that once tolerated their dysfunction. And what's even more powerful, you don't need them to witness it, because emotional maturity is realizing you don't need closure from the people who refuse to give you clarity in the first place. You don't need applause. You don't need validation. You don't need to make them understand. Your dignity is no longer on the auction block. You've reclaimed it, not by fighting for it, but by embodying it. Seneca once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." So instead of mirroring their chaos, you chose self-respect. Instead of reacting to every provocation, you responded with silence and strategy. Instead of trying to teach them a lesson, you became the lesson. Because nothing teaches quite like absence. Nothing confronts quite like peace. Nothing proves your power like walking away and never looking back. This is emotional intelligence. It's knowing that not every insult deserves a rebuttal. Not every betrayal deserves your breakdown. Not every invitation to drama needs an RSVP. You are no longer moved by noise, because you've become rooted in clarity. And what they never expected, what most manipulators never calculate, is that you would stop trying to make them better, and instead, focus on becoming unshakable yourself. You didn't destroy them. You didn't try to ruin their reputation. You didn't need to. You simply removed your energy. And when your energy is authentic, kind, focused, and rare, its absence speaks volumes. So if you're wondering what justice looks like in the Stoic path, it's this. No screaming, no proving, no posting subliminals online, just boundaries. Non-response and quiet success, that's what emotional intelligence looks like. That's what dignity in motion looks like. So today, if someone underestimated you, if someone tried to dim your light or test your worth, don't fight them, outgrow them. And when they look back wondering where you went, let your peace be the answer, because in the end, they won't remember what you said. They'll remember how calm you stayed, while everything they tried to control fell apart without you. That is your justice. That is your victory. That is the Stoic way. Part 9. Irreversibility of growth. There comes a point on the healing journey when something shifts, quietly, permanently, and undeniably. You stop waiting for the apology. You stop checking if they've changed. You stop wondering if it could have gone differently. Because now, you've outgrown who you had to be in their presence. And even if they came back tomorrow, arms wide open, words rehearsed, tears falling, they still wouldn't have access to the version of you they once knew. Why? Because that version of you no longer exists. That version, the one who tolerated disrespect, explained themselves repeatedly, overextended for love, or shrunk to keep the peace, has been laid to rest. And in their place stands someone new, someone evolved, someone built from broken moments, someone shaped by the pain, but no longer defined by it. This is the beauty and the power of irreversible growth. It's not bitterness. It's not pride. It's not payback. It's clarity. When someone wrongs you, the first thing you lose is often your footing. You stumble, question yourself, feel disoriented. But if you stay the course, if you choose reflection over reaction, silence over spite, self-respect over chasing, something incredible happens. You rise, not loudly, not dramatically, but undeniably. And that rise takes you to a place that their apology can't reach, because growth is not just healing wounds. It's becoming unreachable to the people who once had the power to harm you. Even if they return, they are not returning to the same you. And you're no longer standing in the same place, craving the same things. They may finally see your value, but you're no longer offering yourself as a discount version. They may now speak your language, but you've learned an entirely new one built on boundaries, peace, and purpose. And here's what's even more powerful. You didn't change to prove anything to them. You changed because your soul demanded it. That's the kind of growth that no one can reverse. That's the kind of growth that doesn't need validation. It speaks for itself, in your energy, in your choices, in your absence. And in this place, this elevated space, they can't reach you anymore. Not because you're hiding, but because you've become too rooted in your worth to entertain their confusion. You see, true elevation is not about punishing others. It's about honoring yourself. It's knowing that not everyone deserves access to the healed version of you, because access to you is a privilege, not a right. And once they violate it, they don't get to simply walk back in, no matter how sincere their words, no matter how much time has passed, no matter how many memories still echo. You've outgrown the dynamic. You've outgrown the emotional games. You've outgrown the version of you who needed their approval to feel complete. And that is irreversible. There are things no one can take from you. Not even the most manipulative betrayal, not even the deepest wound. They can never take your soul. They can never erase your capacity to rebuild. They can never diminish the dignity that rises when you choose peace over chaos. You are not what they did to you. You are what you did with what they did to you. And what you've done is transform. So don't look back wondering if they finally get it. Don't wait for them to acknowledge your glow, because your elevation is not for their validation. It's for your liberation. And that is the kind of freedom they can't follow you into. Part 10. Stoic Wisdom and Final Justice. There's a moment in life, after the pain, after the silence, after the rebuilding, when you realize you don't need revenge. You don't need the last word. You don't even need them to see how far you've come, because peace has already given you everything you thought vindication would. And this is where the wisdom of the Stoics becomes more than philosophy. It becomes a way of life. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Let that sink in. You don't need to become cold, manipulative, or bitter just because someone tried to wound you. You don't need to compete with their chaos or match their cruelty, because the greatest justice isn't in mirroring the harm, It's in refusing to become the kind of person who could ever cause it. That's not weakness. That's power. And it's a power most people will never understand, because we live in a world that glorifies the loud, the reactive, the performative. A world where social media begs you to clap back, to prove your worth, to show them what they missed. But the Stoic doesn't chase attention. The Stoic becomes the answer. Let me tell you about Elena. She was betrayed by people she once would have taken bullets for. Friends, a partner, even family. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was how easily they replaced her, how little they acknowledged the damage. And for a while, she wanted revenge. She wrote the messages in her head, imagined the dramatic comebacks, envisioned the moment they'd crawl back and beg for her presence. But she didn't act on any of it. She stayed quiet. She chose stillness. And in that silence, something else was born. Not revenge, not pettiness, but growth. Elena started therapy. She launched a small business. She cut ties with anything that drained her. She traveled. She healed. She got stronger, not just emotionally, but spiritually, mentally, and financially. Years later, people who once ghosted her now watch her in silence. They scroll through her life from a distance, barely recognizable to the woman they once thought they broke. And here's the truth. Elena never needed to announce her comeback. She was the comeback. That is Stoic justice. It doesn't scream, it doesn't explain, it doesn't chase. It simply becomes. And that's the real message here. You don't need karma to show up with flashing lights. You are the karma. When you evolve beyond the reach of those who once thought they could diminish you. When you walk with grace, when you protect your peace, when you create a life so full, so aligned, so grounded, that nothing they say, do, or think matters anymore. You've stopped trying to win a game that was never worth playing. You've stopped being reactive and started being intentional. And in doing so, you've already won. Because peace is the final justice, and no one can take it from you unless you give them permission. So the next time you wonder if the universe will deal with those who wronged you, remember this. You don't need to see their downfall. Just stay focused on your rise. Because when you no longer need revenge, when your soul no longer craves closure, when your silence speaks louder than their noise, that's when you know you've outgrown the storm. And that is your final victory. Sometimes the most devastating blow is nothing at all. No revenge. No loud exit, no burning bridges, just quiet indifference. You didn't scream. You didn't fight. You didn't spend months trying to convince them of your worth. Instead, you disappeared from their emotional theater. You walked out with your dignity intact. That was the moment they lost. Because here's the truth most people won't admit. They expected a reaction. They counted on the chaos. They wanted you to fall apart, to spiral, to chase. But what did you do? You healed in silence. You stopped playing the role of the broken one and became the one who rose. And that, more than any revenge, more than any bitter words, is the final blow they never saw coming. Indifference isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's the moment you realize you don't owe closure to people who thrived off your confusion. You don't owe explanations to those who twisted your boundaries. And you sure don't owe your future to the ones who mishandled your heart. Your peace is the loudest justice. Your growth is the sharpest mirror. And your silence, it echoes longer than any scream ever could. You see, the Stoics never taught us to hate or to hurt back. They taught us something far more powerful, to transcend. As Epictetus said, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. And emotional freedom, the kind that makes you unshakable, is the highest form of it. You are no longer seeking punishment. You've become the proof that life corrects itself. No more chasing, no more explaining. You've become unreachable, not because you're hiding, but because you've elevated. You are now the mirror that reflects their choices back to them. You are the reminder. You are the lesson. Because when you chose silence over spectacle, when you chose peace over performance, when you chose to let go instead of hold on, you did the one thing they never expected. You made them irrelevant to your destiny. That's the power of Stoic detachment. It isn't passive. It isn't weak. It's the art of emotional mastery, forged in fire and sharpened by stillness. So if you've ever wondered what the final blow looks like, this is it. You didn't destroy them. You simply became someone they could never reach again. And in that space between what they thought you'd become and who you actually became, lies the justice. The universe didn't forget. It was just waiting for you to stop looking back. You are no longer the wounded. You are the healed. You are no longer chasing answers. You are the closure. And most of all, you are no longer the victim. You're the warning, the mirror, and the legend. If this message found you at the right time, it wasn't by accident. Take a moment, breathe deep, and ask yourself, what am I still giving energy to that no longer deserves access to me? If this video helped you reclaim even a piece of your peace, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because this isn't just content. It's a movement of quiet strength, emotional mastery, and unshakable dignity. Drop a comment below. I choose peace over performance. Let's build a community of calm power together. This is the Stoic path forward. And it's only just beginning.